Hi, good afternoon. Hello, yes. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here on day one of the 2023 NGC Bocas Lit Fest. It's so good to see so many of your faces back in person. We've missed you. It has been a long 4 years, and we're so happy to be back here at our home at Nalis and the old fire station. My name is Shivanee Ramlochan, and I'm honored and delighted and excited to be chairing this very special Take 3 panel with Safiya Kamaria Kinshasa, Desiree C. and Samantha Thornhill. Please welcome them. These are 3 poets who are doing bold, outrageous, formalistically challenging and daring things in their poetry. I've been honored to read them and to get to know them through the poems, and I am sure by the end of this session, you will also feel inspired and moved by their powerful work. I will begin by introducing them in turn as they take to the mic. Our first reader is Desiree C. author of What Noise Against the Cane, published by Yale University Press, which won the 2020 Yale Series of Younger Poets Prize. Desiree is also the author of the fiction chapbook, In Dirt or Saltwater, published by O'Clock Press in 2016. And she has short stories and poems published in a variety of venues. What Noise Against the Cane was longlisted for the 2022 OCM Bocas Prize for Caribbean Literature, and Desiree was one of this year's 2023 OCM Bocas Prize for Poetry judges. Please welcome her.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Love to see you, and it's great to be back here. The first poem that I'm reading is inspired by the Haitian Revolution, and it's called Chant for the Waters and Dirt and Blade, so I'll read a little bit of that. I am I, but I won't spill my name. Not here on this damned rock pushed out bloody from the bowels of the sea. Marketplace Island, where the clouds crest and birds song all for sale, profit of my black, my stewed puss on the plate, in the belly of my captor. What am I? What dare I? Grease up to quiet the squeak, a howl camouflage destined to burst forth, murderous as a wave. Meek today, tomorrow cupped for my inheritance of rage. My name soldiers up like bile, but I dare not allow it. Swallow it, bury it, down with the other human parts of me. I, husk of girl orphaned at the ocean's distant edge. Before ship, before humid choke of hull, before trade wind splintering me off into the world's directions, a girl and I, unbroken and spotless, smooth as obsidian's kiss. My hands, my womb, whittled to a tool, to build what? A white man's skull temple, his leaning empire of ash and bone, his coffee, his cane, arrows towards the death of everything. The land chewed up, the skin forests, his God within the vulture's jaw. The island made into a wicked stain, a lump in the throat of my mother. But if not here, then where, crude shadow of home, my blood, my grief glistens the soil. The land and me stubborn kin, the land made me a new being, forged of a greedy flame, my blood already here. My God's breathing in the hills, in the slow tilt of evening, my God stirred me into a battle song, my muck, my cane, my muddy island, my life, my death, my cliffs, my body's bloom. And so as I said, that last section is thinking through the act of liberation under the system of enslavement and the plantation and slavery. And so this one is set in contemporary New York and Caribbean life. And it's also called Chant for the Waters and Dirt and Blade, Slight Return. A cemetery, A memory of the cemetery flooded with the murmur of the living, the candles, small fires nesting on the graves, my grandfather and we, his thin-limbed offspring. Every year in the humid dark, each All Saints' Day, the mosquitoes rising from the grasses to feed. Every year we light, we pray that our dead will not forget the chant below our skins. The scent of melting wax will always call forth the memory of our dead. The unheard footfalls, the bodiless rustling through the dashing leaves. On this Hallows Eve, I am listening to the cars sounding their grievances on Flatbush Avenue while hemming words in my apartment, wishing that I could wake up tomorrow in my first country to visit what remains of my grandfather, to go to him, to the cemetery of his mother, his father, and the wax riding the damp air, its fragrance winding beyond the dark palm prints of a bacano tree. Who? What? How do I believe? My worship colonized, my gods painted in a foreign face, my grief song milked in the raised woods, shipped off most wanted commodity. I stuff my ears against the old spirit's call, fearful of the way the past speaks to me. I cling to cold reason, but find empire's grasp especially there. I believe in what makes me free. I believe in the red-hot flowers crowning the head of the flamboyant tree. I believe in nutmeg ground down for cassava pone, and the hands, the firm singing hands that push its measurements through the decades. My goddess is the wave unsheathing, my name strung through the conch's contralto. Where will we live, I ask my ocean-torn love? Where will we raise our children if my fibroid womb will allow we of many soils, we who know the curse is the blessing is the curse, we of many and no homes, we who destroy and build, who send our love haunts along the currents? Whether quick clapping of hands or hymns of lambs and mercy or fistful of cowrie thrown across a mat or psalms to tread the lion and the cobra or cymbals drawn in cornmeal guarded throughout the brutal passage, I fear that I will never be fully at home, that the very first leaving cracked the skull of my belonging, that when I eventually stop moving, I won't understand the land's grieved tongue. I brown the sugar in the heavy bottom pot to fill up every space, to remind myself of language. I belong to the foam that singes the sand where I was thrown to the waves. Just weeks into the world, my eyes widening to limestone cliffs, to see almonds ripening upon the shore. My hands are the ibises soaring the salt-washed dawn, cleaving the sky open like a blade.
Thank you, Desiree. Our next reader, Safiya Kamaria Kinshasa, is a British-born Barbadian poet, dancer, and choreographer. Cane, Corn, and Gully, published by Outspoken Press, is her first poetry collection, and her work has also appeared in numerous publications. Sophia is a national and international spoken word champion, an Obsidian Foundation Fellow, and an Apples and Snakes Jerwood Arts Poetry and Performance recipient. She won the 2020 Culture Recordings New Voice in Poetry Prize and was shortlisted for the Outspoken Page Poetry Prize and Creative Future Writers Award. She placed third in the 2022 London Magazine Poetry Prize. Please welcome her.
So I'm going to read you extracts from the penultimate poem in my collection. It is formulated from a series of dances, and we'll talk more about where the dances came from. This last piece, or penultimate piece, is the culmination of a grand choreography. So many dancers spanning over 400 years. So I will be reading extracts from these dancers, women. she, my nation. This island, more ocean than land, I hear and yonder reverend say, God bless this place and all its renders. No blessings for me. It don't see me is a land. A string, bead, and shell round my arm, neck, and leg. Dig my heels engraved, mixed with water. Spin in the air and gather all it. Sweat upon the ashes, bring it back in memories. I is more nation than woman. I am this place. Would please me if Barbados could know that. I don't want master waste me. If I were a tree, I feel no wit. I pick a sick yellow ball off a tree, spat out its flesh, left a trail of skin, then get punished for mess. Someone is watching, writing me away. A naturalist watches and writes her briefly, gives more focus to a yellow-orange fruit and its brethren. 1742, St. Lucie, Barbados, sargassum green leaves seduce a man who says they have nipple-like qualities. Between them are white petals folded like bibs, thick-skinned fruit slightly bigger than apples. He calculates how many pints can be squeezed, shakes every last drop as though he were urinating. He notes how wealthy the soil should be, paying special attention to the way the roots grovel. Perhaps the fruit's obedience makes its bitterness agreeable, flashing itself atop the bark. He pierces his thumb as far as it can fall. Meanwhile, a woman wails as smoke rises from her forehead. 1636, St. Philip, a Morby woman lets her old clothes fall from her back, a standard trade-off to earn a living here. The air is exasperated. A woman, cinnamon and cloves, returns to herself. Her sister helps her lift crates from her head. She does not climb, fearing someone would be up there. Imagine if you reached the top, met the source of your curse, and crawled in its eyes. The sisters, they shake they from their dresses, lift and drop their shoulders like babies' lungs, swing themselves into tatty curtain shapes. They take their parade to the porch, mimic each other's steps, accomplished and obscene, breadfruit and bottoms, catching a fever past midnight. Have you ever noticed the way it undulates, a flag, like a woman's tummy? A woman stepped in pearls stares at a candle who doesn't know he's burning. 1925, Brooklyn, New York, psalms are offered to Jesus, led by a choir trimmed in green, gold, and gossip. Hallelujahs and amens wet the congregation's throats. The fifth offering plate, this service, is passed. Negro worship costs more. The woman, in pearls with no more change, leaves her seat. She is suspicious of men who keep their heads down, statue or not. A few blocks south, a young boy is coughing his youth. She shuffles forward, forward, head shaking as if it were breaking from a cocoon. Let's hope the statue is taking note of this. Are you taking notes of this? 1544, Ichi Rugenheim. When the Negroes left their boxes, bullets broke from their masters. One, Mr. Woman, Northeast. 1694, none of your business, Barbados. A woman who refuses to wait 130 years, turns right, passes a goat, crosses a ravine. Every so often she rests and slides beneath herself. Mud, coral, sand. Her passage resembles her veins more than her cornrows. She revisits her nakedness, like the moon revisits its face. Slime and dribble still there. Rotten wood still there. Blood and iron still there. Trader body still there. It's funny how you spend your life learning how to speak emancipation, then never leave the place you came from, no matter how far you run. And while I am here, our twists and turns can be seen in fireworks tormenting and celebrating the darkness. 2018. Ace Hotel Rooftop Lounge, Los Angeles. Independence Day. I am reminded chaos immigrates between spaces we occupy. We is emancipation. We is the infuriating belief things will be better. I watch couples buy rum. I peer over the rooftop and see a homeless descendant heading to Skid Row. I know she feels it her duty to fit into spaces as small as shopping trolleys to evacuate herself when convenient for buyers. If I am to forever be a delusion of liberty, then I come restoring dawn and liquor, hot like a grown man without titty milk. Thank you.
Thank you, Sophia. Samantha Thornhill is a globally traveled poet, educator, and children's author from Trinidad and Tobago. After graduating with an MFA in poetry from the University of Virginia, for a decade she was poetry professor at the Juilliard School in New York City. The author of almost a dozen children's books, Samantha published her debut poetry collection, The Animated Universe, from People Tree Press in 2022. Please welcome her.
Peace and love, everyone. Peace and love in the house. It's wonderful to be here. Thank you for all of this. Thank you for inviting me, Nicholas, and for warming this up for me, because I was nervous about this, but nowadays their poetry just kind of settled me into what we're really here to do, and it's about the work. I wrote this piece in New York City where I taught for 10 years. I was teaching in an 8th grade creative writing class. And this piece is called The Animated Universe. What if I were to tell you that I am you? That your face is my mirror? What if we're all infinite expressions of one beloved? That we, my friends, are multi-dimensional masterpieces? What if I were you, with your ancestors ghosting through my veins, housing your past life pains instead of mine? If I had the sweet and sour privilege of ambling in your dress rehearsals of skins across the cosmos, then would I arrive at your exact missteps? What if my failure to understand you is my folly? What if it is possible to be broken and still whole, brilliant fissures of light leaking up and through? What if vulnerability is our best armor, our iron? What if pristine planets of perfect beings do exist, but we chose this evolutionary planet of hard rocks? What if the assignment is to forget ourselves into remembrance, to love unconditionally in the muck, to spiral up from our primordial depths? What if we chose all of this anyhow? Our wonderfully shitty parents, hurdles, backhands, and crash landings. What if the Most High indwells in the lowly and far-flung, and from the reaches of hell, we can still be each other's angels? Friends, if I were to tell you all of this, would you believe me? Or would you nod and say, I know? Jezebel's song. Jezebel always wore the same pantyhose to mass. Jet black with a control top and a run as long as the Amazon. Gelatinous mounds shifting as she traipsed the cathedral in her Sunday best. Jezebel winked at the men with her left eye, their wives with her right, then kissed every baby. Peppermint lips, cool ocean floors. I would count each click of her Saturday night heels. You studying your maths? She asked me once. Under the heating lamp of Mummy's gaze, I turned my face into Mummy's paisley hip. Whenever Jesus' body slipped gingerly into her mouth, I held my breath to hear the sound of his sizzle. I thought it was just me until once the organ even hushed. Rumors said Jezebel could actually sing her ass off. Transforming a broomstick into a microphone once at her gingerbread house, the wives called that place. I felt like a lion in tall fever grass waiting for Jezebel's eruption into a smoky song. But she didn't even sing Our Father, just hummed and swayed. Hummed and swayed. Her mellifluous music reminded me of the women locked inside my uncle's speaker box, their voices curving mountain roads. Whenever Jezebel didn't balance in on the sun's rays, Sundays weren't quite so bold-faced. No pantyhose run snaking down her legs and pigeon-toed stroll, bleeding dancing shoes, thick custard grin. No altar boys longing to taste February on her breath, or wives with cut eye that could sharpen pencils. And there was a gaggle of us girls who would reach home, dust off our mother's high heels, licking red pistachio shells just for the lipstick. Thank you so much. And this third piece is called Second Religion. My husband. He returns home to me from market, from mosque, with her scent on his clothes, beard, hands. This is how a first wife becomes second fiddle. When my urge to reach for him strikes like inspiration, like gold, yet she is there, all laced up in his fingers like beads of prayer. My dutiful husband, his chest of honey, how he worships her. On waking, he is a mere river of cells running to her altar, syllables in supplication. This will be the last time, he says, and borrows my day's sweat to travel her home from whatever corner he finds her on display. What's a wife to do or say, huh? They light each other up. Before opening my eyes on most mornings, I can smell them together. She readies him for her first surahs before dawn as I enjoy my dreams. And in those low etheric hours, she catches his first train of kisses. My lips go untouched for her smell on his words. Sometimes I leave these four walls with nowhere to go, but to stand on the spine of our skinny street and let the wind grope me as I reason with Allah under sun or stars. My husband cares that I'm displeased. It is a sleeping termite between us. He breaks promises to himself to quit her. Not because he wishes to, but because he knows he should, for she is a known gold and grave digger. A pity. Life becomes a slow death sentence when she is not present for his worship. That smoking hot body, slim and white, her flaming hair growing ashen as he kills her softly with his slow, passionate drags.
Thank you so much for those readings. You can all hear what I've been reading and encountering in these books, that power is in this room most palpably and presently. And I want to start our conversation by talking about disruption. We've all inherited, as poets and writers, an idea that the Caribbean story looks a certain way, has been told a certain way, largely by men. And it's hard to let go of that hegemony and let our own poems speak and breathe. And it's a question for all three of you about how you've channeled and challenged that disruption in your own lives and how that led to the poems being so powerfully transcendent.
Well, I see you making firm eye contact with me, right? So, so I guess I will start. Where do I begin with disruption, right? So I mentioned earlier that first poem that I wrote is really thinking through the plantation space, thinking about what it would mean to take up arms for liberation, and also honoring the history of the Haitian Revolution while thinking about what a country like Haiti has to deal with today because of that very act of liberation. So I began there, and I think I began there because of really, I want to say a rash of anti-Black violence where I was living in the States, but if I say a rash, it makes it seem as if it's momentary, right? It's kind of an ongoing, continuous violence. And so I think the disruption began with trying to make sense of a hostile world, right? Not only in the States, but really in a universe and society that has been built upon these kinds of exploitations, right? And yeah, there's a lot. I'm gonna pause there because I'm sure I'm going to kind of dovetail back in there, but I had to start there. It felt like an honest place for me to acknowledge something that I have very personal ties to, actually, and to think about how it connects to the historical and how that continues on today.
Well, I'm gonna take it. When I think of disruption, I have a very interesting relationship with disruption, in that when my mother was making me, they had to perform a C-section because I would not emerge. I disrupted my own process of birth. And when it was time for me to start to speak, I disrupted that too. And I didn't speak for a long time, and I used to throw horrible tantrums. This is a family folklore. And then one day, as if a trapdoor opened, so did my mouth, and I began to speak. So when I think of disruption in my own life, I think of the ways in which I have disrupted my own life's path, my own trajectory, to learn something new, to have a different experience. And my own life has been a series of disruptions. And the ways in which, I can't speak for the ways in which I channel that in my work. I would let the critics and the essay writers do that. But I'll say that in the performance of work, I chose to disrupt public spaces with poetry by taking crews of poets underground and performing poetry in the subways. And doing this in a way that it was like a pop-up effect that invited people into what was happening and created a container for poetry to exist in spaces that people would not expect it otherwise to happen. to let people know that poetry does exist everywhere and poets are everywhere. And so I found that I wanted to find ways to disrupt the atmosphere with what we do. And so I'm continuously finding ways to do that, sometimes online, and sometimes, you know, in everyday spaces. Even sometimes when I'm on my own, I might have a bookmark with a poem on it and I'll give it to someone. And I find that to be a disruption, because you're disrupting someone's day to bless them. And so I find disruption in all of the ways that we do it are so important to sort of upsetting the status quo, the matrix of histories that have been created, and illusions as well. And that sort of troubling that narrative, I think allows others to emerge.
I think that, so when I started CaneCon in Gully, I was actually trying to process the words of overseers, slave traders, plantation owners, through their letters. So we're talking first-hand documents, so not just from history books, first-hand documents. Slavery is 100 times worse than whatever is written in the history book. It was heinous, and I'm traumatized and waking up in cold sweats in the middle of the night. And I feel that for me, there was a disruption in the story that I wanted to hear. It's almost like there was a pause in history. So if you think of a river, and you know, like the river is literally being blocked by a large trunk or several rocks or boulders or something. And I think that, so what happened was this collection came out of discovering that in the midst of those descriptions, because we have the overseers and the traders who are obsessed with the enslaved people's movements and bodies, I saw dance. And when I saw the movement, I said, okay, as a dancer, choreographer, I can translate that into poetry, and poetry is the perfect medium to bring that to life. So I was therefore able to kind of break the disruption. I feel that was my way of breaking a disruption, and then bringing all these new narratives out by saying, okay, well, hold on a minute. I see what these people didn't realize, and what all these historians didn't realize, is that we actually have speech. Dance is speech in the African diaspora. Dance is speech. So we have notes. We have thousands and hundreds of stories, poems from our ancestry that is still yet to be revived. I've literally done 0.1. This is now turning into a PhD. I'm so serious. Like it's going on and on and on. So I didn't realize what I had then. But that for me was the disruption, and maybe bringing an end to a disruption, or helping bring an end to that disruption, and letting that river of history kind of flow and bring all those stories to the surface through dance and poetry.
Thank you for that. There are ways in which poets live with the work that they write on the page. It's often a solitary, sometimes hermetic process, but each of you have done radical and generous acts of public poetry, and the ways in which the poems offer themselves to audiences, to fellow poets, to anyone who can find themselves in the verse is truly inspiring. From Samantha, taking poems underground, to Sophia, the entire kinetic embraces of Laba notation, which we'll talk about a bit later, to Desiree literally breaking the fourth wall in the most ingenious way in the book, and that is a hint that you have to get the book to see how she does it. I want to know more about how inclusion is an important part of all your practices, and what it means to be both public with this work and also for it to have a private heart. I'm not pointedly looking at anyone.
I have no idea how I'm going to answer this one, but I'm thinking of something that my professor Rita Dove told me when I went to visit her some years ago. She talked about being a public hermit. And you have to understand who Rita Dove to understand what public means. Like, this is a woman that she was the poet laureate during the Clinton administration in the US, and second, Black Pulitzer Prize winner for poetry. She's just she's a living legend, and she's a very sought after poet, and yet she lives on this little hill in Charlottesville, Virginia, and has her ballroom dancing studio attached to her house, so she doesn't have to leave it as much to dance. And so when she mentioned being a public hermit, that's just something that has really stayed with me, because I do have a particular tension between, there's the monastic craft of writing, which you were just talking about. It is a solitary, sacred type of craft. Yet there's this inherently public dispensation of it, as is evidenced in the griots of West Africa, who this is a public, so there's this interesting thing that you write in private that you present in public, and then the tension that I experience is I realize that I am very ungenerous. I live so much more life than I write about. And I've been in contemplation of that recently, like, wow, how many poems could I have written if I were more generous? But I keep so much of my life for myself. And I think this is what allows my heart to have its caverns. There's something that I think it's very important, and I teach my students this, that it's, as much as you want to share, I think about, here's an example. I was once watching this show, Cribs, and Mariah Carey was walking around showing her crib, right? She was showing her vast space, she showed us her lingerie closet, and then we came upon a door, and she said, "We're not gonna come in here." I don't know what was behind it. It could have been a room with a piano in it, but she chose not to allow the cameras to come into that room, yet we were in her lingerie closet, right? And I found that so interesting, and I find that so important, that we keep something for ourselves, that we do hold our life close because it's sacred and it's precious to us. And then what we decide to share through our craft is a true gift, and it's nothing anyone had to pull out of us or guilt us into writing. It's something that we truly wanted to give. And I find that to be the balance that I've arrived at today.
I'm so inspired by that balance that you just generously walked us through, right? And it's a balance that I'm always trying to strike as a poet, as someone who's teaching various classes, doing all of these things, and finding a way to be both very private and public at the same time. And so, of course, while writing the book, I found that I was really internal, kind of sifting through history, but also grappling with how can I render a lot of these experiences, right? And how can I deliver that in a responsible way? So there was a lot of wrestling there. And one of the things, which Sophia, is why I so appreciate you talking about dance, right? One of the ways that I became sort of public in the actual process of making the book was that I started dancing, right? And so doing like Caribbean folklore classes, which really helped me to find a balance with the weight of the history, but also the weight of heavy contemporary things, and sort of being held by a great lineage, right? And community in that way. But also the stories that are held within these movements, stories of love, of revolution, of harvest, of what to plant. And so I think that's a beautiful way that we've always been kind of really walking the line of a public-private, and even thinking about the act, the generous act. I keep thinking about this word of passing down a history as a way of being public, right, and envisioning a future for ourselves, which I think is quite radical. And Shivanee, you mentioned the fourth wall that I'm breaking in What Noise Against a Cane. And so if you crack open the book, you'll see that there's a line of text in the bottom margins of the book that I call the sea voice. And so at some point when I was making the book, it occurred to me that there had to be this disruptive voice that just had to be all throughout the book. And I didn't know at first what that voice was. And actually, when it came out, it started to sound maybe like the voice of a grandmother or, like a tanty, or just like really, really personal, but also really demanding to be seen. And so that voice, again, pulls the public or the private into the public, because it's commenting on history, it's commenting on me, it's talking about climate change. And it's a way of saying, again, that we are having these conversations all the time, whether or not there's anyone looking at the conversations that we're having, right? Like that grandmother who might be in the yard, in her garden, is thinking about geopolitics, is thinking about the world, is thinking about how systems are constructed. And so I really wanted to honor that with that line of text. And again, thinking of how we are working all the time and living all the time, even when we are not recognized.
Privacy and being public. Well, first of all, let me start by saying I'm a humanitarian who hates people. So it is very difficult. Being a public person is hard, and being so open is hard. But one thing I've learned through writing poetry is that it doesn't matter what you write about. Even if you focus on one topic, whatever you're ignoring, you're also speaking about that topic. So Griffith Hughes, the poem that I did the extracts from, this man is writing about a grapefruit. There's a woman who's being tortured, basically, behind him. He's writing about a grapefruit, and this is the first description of a grapefruit in history in Barbados. There's a woman being tortured. That tells me everything I need to know about this man, as much as so if we go to, National History Museum and in London, he is recognized as a great writer. He's recognized as a great man because he gave us so much. There's a woman, I'm going to say it again, there's a woman being tortured behind him. In front of him is a grapefruit. So, even whatever we write about, I don't really believe so much in hiding spaces. So there's always something else that is unseen. And sometimes when we're reading poetry, readers are so, I give readers a lot of credit. I say, I just give my work into the world and let people unearth as much as they want to, because you can. You read one poem 1,000,000 times, you will read something different every single time just by what the poet is not writing. So yeah, I really feel that as a poet, I know that there are things, so there are people in this book. So I talk about womanhood, it's mainly from the voices of women. I don't speak about my daddy, but he is there. And it is very evident that men are here. But they are not necessarily, there's scatterings here and there, but it's almost like you can still feel what else is going on. I tell the story, I'm writing a poem about my breakfast that people can tell me my whole life. People will come up to me and say, this is about men, even though you're all about you. Right? From this poem about breakfast, so there were always nuance that people are going to read into. As you can have Ilya Kaminsky, one-line poems. We can read a whole life in that one-line poem. And also as a dancer, someone who reads body movement, people lie all the time and your body tells you everything you need to know. Are you okay? Yeah, I'm fine. No, right? So I'm not really this private, public. The moment you write a word, you are saying so much, so much. And a lot of times, last point, sometimes when you're starting poetry, and I say this in classes, a lot of poets hide behind all the words. We say words, we keep saying words, and there's sometimes it's just a line that needs to be said, and that's actually enough. Yeah.
Wow, thank you for that. I mean, in all three of these collections, agents of elemental change have become very echoey, are just rippling through the book. You're all contending with how nature has been used as an agent of colonization, against the imperative of black and brown bodies, and also how black and brown voices reclaim nature for their own purposes, to their own ends, and their own autonomy. And I was desperately curious to know how you each find yourselves in nature, particularly in our Anthropocene, where the systems that we have inherited are not always conducive to our survival.
For me, I'm trying to be in nature more, and so currently, I recently moved to South Carolina, and there are mountains around, forests, right? And so nature becomes a place for me to retreat to just balance myself. But also because of who I am, I'm always just kind of like brooding, thinking about history and who has been on the land and who has been pushed off. I think it's important for me to be in those spaces, not only to receive the gifts of the spaces, but also to kind of give back in terms of recognizing what has occurred on the land, right? And so I'm not saying that every moment I'm thinking of this, and I'm not telling you to, constantly think of the weight of every single act that has occurred, but it's important because I do believe these vestiges remain. And so currently, for me, it's thinking about climate. It's thinking on both a large scale, but also a smaller scale of just what I am doing in the dirt. Oftentimes, when I think about nature as well, I think about really like my earliest memories growing up in Faizabad and just having that just nature all around me, right? The bush, and how that stays with me and how it informs my poetics, even when I think it's not working. And so I love that I can always carry it with me, even when I'm in this like completely concrete landscape, urbanized, quote unquote, developed area, but that is always there for me.
When I was in Barbados writing the collection, I realized that there were a lot of instruments that I wasn't able to listen to because some instruments are no longer around, and there were some rhythms I couldn't quite get, but I would recreate the choreographies in the very places that they were performed. So in plantations, in gullies, in marketplaces. And sometimes when I needed music, I would just listen to the land. I would listen to the land, let the land dictate how to grasp the choreography of the poem and also the flow of the poetry in itself. So in the book, I then decided, okay, I'm gonna have guest choreographers come in and help me with the writing. So a bearded fig tree is a guest choreographer. We've got an Afro comb who's a guest choreographer. And they're basically, so the Afrocom was on the ground. I said, you are a choreographer, you're a guest choreographer. And they shaped the way some of these poems work because I was having such a hard time making certain decisions. So a bearded fig tree, how would a bearded fig tree allow a poem to flow? Okay, so the bearded fig tree starts talking and starts giving the dancers directions, and then the Afrocom comes in and says, now you gotta be more militant, and like this, and like this, and like this, and like this. So yeah. So I let the land of Barbados just dictate, and it helped. It helped the editing.
My relationship to nature is a growing one. After leaving Trinidad at a pretty young age, I moved to the suburbs of South Florida. The land is flat. It's a bunch of pastel houses. And I really felt very disconnected from nature for much of my childhood. And when I remembered Trinidad, I remembered the drive to Maracas. I remembered that lush greenery. And I remembered it with a type of nostalgia. And so in my book, The Animated Universe, you might see some poems where there's a sort of sense of wonderment around a fig, around blackberries. And that's because I've been, as an adult, I've been plunged into natural spaces via writing retreats and different opportunities. And it's really in late stages of my life, I've returned to nature on my terms. And I've been able to, create I would say that the animated universe as a title really blooms out of this idea that these things are alive. There's a consciousness behind objects that are living and inanimate. And when you really examine, a fig tree or a blackberry bush or any other fruit tree, it's a lot of fruit poems. You'll see that human nature exists in that as well. You will see that the natural order of the universe existing in the microcosm of a fruit's life. And so I found that in my later years, I was able to sort of more intellectually engage nature. And at this stage in my life, I'm going to start planting. I have a basil plant that I'm minding. That's my first little baby. And because the other plants that have been entrusted to me have died in my care, so I thought I would give myself another chance to deepen my relationship with nature, which I believe is waiting for us with loving arms, to treat her properly and to actually reconnect the way that our ancestors did.
Thank you for that. Thank you. I'm gonna relinquish some of my own greed and open the floor to comments and questions. There is a roving mic that will come straight to you. So there's not. So please, anything you would like to say, now is the time.
Safiya, I was hoping that you could tell a little bit about giving the voiceless and the lost expression through broken language. If you would just help a little bit for people who are somewhat mystified about how dare you perform this speechless speech. And also if you wanted to talk a little about dance, about Laban notation. Thank you.
So while I was, when I first stumbled across these choreographies, one thing that struck me was, even though there was such detailed description, when I started to replicate them, I was breathing heavy, because I had to figure out, because they were, the descriptions, when I talk about these descriptions, I mean, and stomping their feet 5 times and jumping up 6 times, and then there's a break, and then there's jump, and there's a da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And one thing I noticed is that sometimes the slave traders and overseers never spoke about breath. So it's almost like taking away the humanity of the enslaved at the same time by still talking about movement in the same way you might talk about a horse, in the same way you might talk about an animal, in the same way you might talk about cutting down a tree. So I had to make sure that in this collection, I actually left space with just punctuation, just breath, just literal punctuation. And sometimes I remember when someone first read these poems and said, "Is this erasure?" And I said, no erasure, it's just breath. And I think that all I want people to understand regarding, there's, so I'll talk about Laban notation briefly in a minute, but they were breathing, which means they were alive, which means when we read history books, you have a horrific accident, a horrific incident, and then you have a full stop. I hate these full stops. I hate them with a passion, because it says, okay, this is the end of this enslaved person's story. No, it's not, because we are here. We are literally here. There would be no Afro-diasporic population in the Caribbean if there was this full stop at the end. So I hate it. I removed that full stop, and I said, okay, I want breath, breathing, constantly to take place. I want to reclaim this humanity with the people that I'm writing about, and writing that breath into myself. Laba notation, we have music notation, which is on horizontal. We've all seen music notes. Laba notation is vertical, and it's just the documentation of dance. What I did, to purists in the dance world's absolute dismay, I was in a lot of trouble for this, I decided to curve it. I decided to make an arch in our dances because I do not believe that anything linear represents the Afro-diasporic dance cultures. We don't have Laba notation for our dances. It's for ballet. It's for straight, it's for upright, it's for ballet. It's not for... So I said, okay, let me put it on a curve. Let me put it on an axis. There is a key at the back of the collection, but most importantly, left, right, left, right. As long as you can see there is movement constantly happening, that is basically my declaration of saying that these people, these wonderful, incredible, our ancestors got back up, and they kept moving, and they kept moving, then they kept dancing, and they kept dancing. And all the way up until the present day, we still have memories of those dances, which I've tried to replicate. I hope that answers this question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, I have.
Marlene Nobirsi Phillips from Tobago.
Yes, very much so. I believe that, so Mnabuse Philip, I believe that we are writing into the same ocean. And I love the craftsmanship of her work where we don't have one word which is equally aligned. And I think this displacing words on the page and displacing breath on the page is something which is very inherent to anybody who is writing with dance and trying to revive history back into life. What I hate that various historians do is they try to make things too linear and too simplified. There is nothing simple about our history. There is nothing easy, and some things are messy. Some things, there is so much entanglement, and we can't just say, this person is bad, this person is good, this thing happened, and job done. No, we can't do that. And I think this is why writing poetry with history is so important. And so I want to use this idea of displacement with words when I'm writing in academia, so moving into academia and saying, well, actually, I'm going to write a history this way, and I think it would be nice if, so I've had to actually write an application to explain to professors why I believe that I don't have to write in a linear fashion. I also had to write an application to explain why I don't want to refer to our people as numbers. So they are still doing that in anthropology. So I've had to do that. So yes, hopefully trying, bit by bit, trying to change things. Yeah.
More questions or comments? There's a question to the front here.
Expressions, you've shared a belief in all of creation being a single entity. How did you arrive at that realization?
I think that I'm still arriving at the realization of the oneness. I look for it. I look for that oneness. I look for the truth in the villain's statement at the end of a movie. You know, I look for the divinity in the darkness. I tend to collapse things. I tend to collapse binaries and boundaries. And it infuriates people in my life. It confuses them. It's how could you believe this and that? I believe in two things coexisting quite peacefully and also quite uncomfortably as well. You know, so I can't say that I've arrived anywhere. But I'm always arriving at this belief that we all do come from a singularity. and that the trauma of our separation is what we're experiencing, and that the yearning for to return to that singularity is what we're longing for. And this is why we do what we do. This is why this private craft makes it out here, because we do wish to connect. And we are looking for each other. This is why you're all here, is that you're looking to connect with something, with someone, with yourself, in a public space. It's all the same, you see. So that's where I am today.
Thank you. Any more questions or comments? Yes, there's one towards the back.
Well, greetings and salutations to the poets. Greetings and salutations to the poets. You guys are a new generation of poets in the Caribbean. You do have a lot of shoes to fill, like Naipaul and Walcott, to name a few. But I'm equally proud of you and your contribution to poetry, and I hope that you fly that Caribbean flag with pride and dignity. And I'm especially proud to know that among those that are here today, I have relatives and cousins that have done this great thing, and I'm really, really proud, and I wish them the best.
I feel that deserves a round of applause. Yes, we have a question to right here. There? No? I invented a question where there was none. I was looking for engagement and I did not see it. There's one to the front here.
Thank you. Thank you to all of you. You were magnificent, all of you. I wanted to ask Safiya if you would talk about fluency. I just thought about, when you were reading that first piece, I thought about Jerome Ellis and his disfluency, his whole concept of disfluency and the project around that. And I guess I still am trying to connect dance as speech. How do I connect dance as speech with disfluency? I hope that question makes sense, but I hope you can answer it. Answer the non-question if you want.
Disfluency, fluency, the breaking. I think, when dance and poetry is not a new thing. I have not recreated the wheel in that sense. The way in which I'm putting the two together on the page is unique to these discoveries and the things that I'm trying to do. But dance and poetry in itself is not unique. With that said, there is a need for people, when they put dance and poetry together, to make everything fit into neat little boxes. We do not fit in neat little boxes. Our movement does not fit into neat little boxes. And she put her hand in the air and the dancer goes, no, that's not how this works. It's not how this works. In poetry, up does not mean up. Down does not mean down. We know this. Poetry is worlds upon worlds upon worlds upon worlds of meaning. In dance, up does not mean up. We are constantly, especially in African diasporic dances, we are defying gravity all the time. We are changing time all the time. You see hip-hop dancers literally breaking lights with their bodies. We don't move the same way. We don't move. So when we're speaking, even when we speak, you hear any West Indian speak. We don't even speak. We talk in every tense, the past tense, the present tense, all in one sentence. So it does. So therefore, I think to answer this question with disfluency and fluency, sometimes there will be words and there will be a break in the body, and it won't necessarily work with the words or with the voice in itself and with the breath. And that in itself is a beautiful thing. When the first time I performed this piece, the first comments that I received was, sometimes your movements do not fit. Sometimes it doesn't really, you're breaking, but the movement seems more fluid to me. No, Clearly, you've never seen hip hop. Clearly, you've never seen any Afro-diasporic dance culture. Clearly, you've never seen West African contemporary. You've never seen that. Clearly, you've never seen quadrille, right? The moment quadrille looks so majestic, but we stop, we pause, we greet our partner, or we frown at them, depending on what they are wearing, or we move on. So, yeah, I think it's a constant process, and I think every poet can attest to this, that the editing continues, and I don't have it perfect yet. I mean, this is one, I can't, oh my gosh, I can't tell you how many hours I spent focusing on where to put a comma. It is embarrassing. I was crying about where to put a comma. It's so embarrassing, but this is the work. And we keep writing and we keep playing. But yeah, fluency, how to be fluent, how to be disfluent, how to connect with the body, break, remold, defy gravity, defy time, work with time, work against time. I hate gravity. It is a nuisance. I hate it. So that is, yeah, so those, yeah, we play.
Any final question, comments, praise, provocation? Now is Sharma Taylor.
Yeah, I can't pass up the opportunity to just give honor to the ladies on the stage. You're amazing. You know, just hearing you talk about your craft, like, you ladies are doing the damn thing, you know? Like, and just, I want to just encourage you to keep going, you know, and blessing us with your words.
So I am here as somebody who, I guess I'm ignorant about poetry and literature. I'm here as a cheerleader to my friend that I love. And when she speaks, sometimes she speaks in another language. We speak the same, but I don't understand. And then we have children. So I'm wondering how, as poets, speaking to everybody else, the regulars, how are we going to create this, I guess, connection to our next generation that they can understand and feel and communicate? Because I think there's a disconnect. They communicate differently already. We don't understand them. So maybe if we empower them and give them the tools for their disfluency, because they don't seem to be understood, they might be able to connect to what is happening in the literary world. Because I know my children don't understand what poetry is. They're not being taught that. They're being taught present tense, past tense, creative writing, and they just want to get a pass, but they're not being taught expression. And we have a lot of people who can't, or young people who can't express themselves, and they are not understood. So as I am listening and I'm trying to understand everything that is happening here, I'm thinking about how can this be communicated and distilled to the young ones who really need a way to express themselves.
The poet Richard Georges talk about part of the problem is that it's the way in which poetry is often taught. So it's taught as if it's a foreign language, right? And that it's this vehicle that we need to interpret. When actually, yes, we can take courses and even degrees about the craft of it to kind of advance our understanding of poetry, but so much of what we are reading and writing is elemental and comes from the self. So I think it really, the responsibility that we have is to let people know that you already have what poetry needs, right, within you. And I think that's a way that you can sort of bridge the gap. And then also, we have to be honest, right, in our writing. And I don't mean always being this kind of truth teller, but we have to be honest in the sense that we are being ourselves. And I think whether we are speaking to the past or speaking to future generations, that honesty shines through. And so when I look at maybe an archive or the work of a poet who has come maybe a century before me, it's that honest rendering of their environment that I connect to, right? So they're not necessarily talking about what they are supposed to say, but they're talking and writing about their truth. and you know, the kind of secrets, again, the private life, the things that are meant to be unsayable and unspeakable. That's what I connect to. So I think we have to have courage, we have to have honesty. Natalie Diaz, often, the poet Natalie Diaz, I've heard her talk about being from the Mojave group, right? And the fact that she believes that, or the elders have told her that the youth do not understand their dreams, right? Because they no longer speak the language of dreams. And so part of that too, I think, is really getting down to what is at the core of who we are, what we are saying, and putting that into the poetry and letting that speak for itself, if we are speaking for ourselves as ourselves.
Thank you so much for that. I think there's no finer way to bring this beautiful gathering to a close than by hearing from the poets again in their own language, in their own poems of rebellion, resistance, survival, and frankly, just badassery. So I will invite Samantha to please share her final poem with us.
Okay, this was so wonderful. Thank you, everybody, for holding space. This piece is called West Indian Wife Speaks from the Other Side. This was a request from my auntie, who's in the audience. West Indian Wife Speaks from the Other Side. It's 5 years now I dead. And my husband does still go to the old year's fete with them good looks that beat all cockfight. Flanked by his old-time partners, stink-mouthed men full of old talk. He sips his punch at creme as they talk, like they eat parrot bottom. Smelling of sweet soap and bay rum, veins full of barbadine and beet pan, my husband's so shorter, you could drink soup on his head. And he could win any limbo contest in town with his back like bamboo. Oh, a watching all the widows, giving he plenty sweet eye. Circling he like windmill blades, wagging they bumsies like force-wiped schoolgirls as he chips the kaiso, sways to parang, eyes closed to all my favorite tunes. He does still love me too bad. He never visits my grave, but comes to every lime. Dogle hair oil up, shoes well shine. Let the cock-bottom widows think he's come to watch them wind their waist and dance like oil in a hot pan. My husband damn well know I ain't never miss a good fete a day in my life, and something as stupid as death will not change that. Just breaths to the new year. And I know he's waiting for me to come and dance in flesh on like boiled corn. He's standing up in the middle of the fete, crooning down the place in his whiny falsetto until I drift over so. Stand up tall in front of he like cobweb broom. He open the eye, look through me, holds his ring hand in the air, and I take it. He drapes his other arm across this breathless continent, my back, where it should be, and we dance just so into another new year.
I just want to live inside that poem. It's actually my favorite poem in that collection, so I'm really happy that you read from it. So I'm going to read a poem called Woman in Dub. And I wrote it at a time when I was obsessed with dub music, and it's so nice to be in an audience where I don't have to explain what dub is. So it is after the line from Lee Scratch Perry and Max Romeo's song, Chase the Devil. Side A. The devil I see is the one I saw and nail out of fears, out of cycles of wound. dread calcifying into prophecy. I put on an iron shirt to face it, chase it, but the cop still pissed drunk with power. I put on an iron shirt, but the men on the street surveil the nipple. Been hounding my punani since before I spilled my first blood. What a menace of a body I hurl blame to the husk. Is the devil real, or is it of my fantastical making? The answer is not the matter. The fact of paranoia be the true violence, warfare, the very presence of the question. I want to peer inward, to take a good look at the sound system, my heartbeat echoing out of my folkloric thirst, my desperate belief in other realities, a B-side where I'm abolished from emotional labor, aka black woman's burden, free to surrender to my own madness, to sink down into the dub of it, stripped of my first voice, reverbing outside the pain of a body. Side B, stripped of my first voice, down in the dub. Cop hounds my blood into paranoia, a black reality, cycle spilled. Power husk, emotional woman, I iron, real street, folkloric and mad, true. Take a good look at the devil, peer into the dread. Men surrender to wound, drunk, calcified, but I, fantastic, chasing echoes, nailed to system, free in sound. I, a fact, answer of my own making. Thank you.
Sophia.
Okay, so I do have a gift for all of you as a thank you to just letting me be a part of this. This is a dream come true, honestly. So 1823, Dougal Dawson was an overseer on Jordan Hill in Trinidad, plantation in Trinidad. So what I managed to do with the help of Greenwich Museum and London Archives is I've actually managed to, for the first time, recreate from his letters to England a dance that was performed on the Jordan Hill plantation in 1823. So this performance that I'm doing for you is the first time that this has actually been revived. What I'm going to ask you to do, because I do not have my percussionist with me, I'm in Trinidad, so I do expect rhythm. I tried this in England, and it was, oh my gosh. Oh Lord. So I'm going to ask you to, there's a specific beat, and let me just check this floor. There's a specific beat that I'm going to need you to do for me to get this is fine, to get this right. So it goes, thank you. Okay, so that is the beat. That is what I need you to do. So you're basically helping me to make sure I can keep the pace of this dance, very quick and short. So this is what I've been able to revive so far from these letters, so you can see what I do and what has been done in this book. So, okay. And it was a woman of about my age performing it, and nothing heinous has happened before and distinctly after this dance, yes? So, okay. All right.
A huge round of applause to Safiya Kamaria Kinshasa, Desiree C. Bailey, and Samantha Thornhill. The animated universe, Cane, Corn, and Gully, and What Noise Against the Cane are all available at the booksellers. Don't let me be able to say that tomorrow. Go get them right now and come get them signed.
I was just going to say, so the way she was, even the head movements, she was never looking up because it was the traders in front of her. She was always looking down. So every single time I perform, head movements, arm movements, every single detail. Yeah, okay.
Please thank these three phenomenal writers again. Get their books, love their books, read the books, then come right back here to hear Kevin Jarrett Hussein and Celeste Mohammed in conversation with Lisa Autar. Thank you, everyone.
Oh, that was so good. Oh, thank you all.
I know.